Introduction. The collision line. The confrontation. The human mammal lives deeply in love with the illusion of retreat. Observe the biomass with aseptic indifference. They transit the ashboard taking lukewarm steps, conditioned by the fear of loss, always keeping a cowardly foot anchored in the safety of the mud. They desire sovereignty and absolute dominion over their ecosystem. They flirt with the idea of hyperdensity, but they always act with their eyes on the emergency exit. They believe, in their immense and pathetic ignorance, that they can taste the immensity of absolute power, and if the cold of the void terrifies them, simply turn around and return to the comfort of the herd. This is a fatal error. Superior physics abhors dimensional tourism. Gravity does not negotiate with indecisive organisms. When a real creator decides to accumulate the mass necessary to alter the topography of their reality, they ineludibly approach an invisible geometric frontier. We call this frontier the collision line. It is the definitive edge of the cliff. It is the thermodynamic precipice. At this limit, the inertia of transformation acquires a force of suction so colossal and violent that the attraction toward the abyss becomes infinitely superior to any biological attempt to break. The biomass tries to cling to the walls of its old life, but the gravity of its core is a black hole. Do you have the coldness to cross the event horizon and let the slave you used to be disintegrate behind you? To master the physics of irreversible manifestation, it is not enough to desire the empire. You must learn to unleash a collapse in your own ecosystem that is so destructive, dense, and definitive that return is impossible. The biological option of returning to mediocrity must become mathematically impossible. You must amputate the umbilical cord that binds you to the illusion of the contingency plan. When you cross the collision line, the atmosphere of your old existence becomes lethal to your holographic lungs. You must force your anatomy to operate. You must operate without a safety net. There is no comfort. There is no warm home to crawl back to when the atmospheric pressure increases, because the fire of your own expansion has incinerated the foundations of compassion. Anchor your lead boots on the edge of known reality. Stifle the survival instinct of your mammalian flesh. Close your physical eyes, and prepare to take the final step into free fall, where transformation is not an option, but a glorious and irreversible sentence. The past is dead. The void is calling. There is no turning back. Only the singularity awaits. Chapter 1. The Acceleration of the Fall, the End of Resistance. The Anatomy of Vertigo, the Mammal's Terror. The leap toward absolute dominance of your three-dimensional ecosystem is not an aristocratic stroll. It is an incalculable geometric precipitation. When the organism decides to uproot itself from mediocrity and accumulate the critical mass needed to alter the ashboard, it is irremediably exposed to the vacuum's gravity. Subject your own body's reaction to the scalpel of the quantum operating room. What happens inside your cellular anatomy when you lose the ground beneath your feet? Primal instinct, forged over millions of years of miserable survival in the jungle, enters a state of acute panic. The biological brain detests the uncontrollable. It detests the lack of a solid base. Sensing the vertigo of the unknown, the nervous system secretes torrents of adrenaline, muscles contract spasmodically, and the entire body adopts the posture of resistance. The mammal tries, with pathetic desperation, to cling to the edges of the abyss. Observe the biomass in change. When the old order collapses and the immensity of a new empire opens beneath their feet, their first instinct is not conquest, it is breaking. They try to cling to old relationships, fossilized routines, or the false security of a miserable salary. Their biological hands claw at the cliff walls in a futile attempt to slow down. That resistance, under the lens of applied thermodynamics, is an abomination. It is the terror of the speed of mutation that chars the wings of false gods before they can even glimpse the core of their own power. Analyze the physics of this evasive behavior with aseptic indifference. Imagine falling through an abyss. Claw friction, the absurdware. Gravity claims you with a force of 1,000 tons. If in the midst of that inevitable precipitation you extend your arms and try to dig your nails into the stone to stop yourself, what do you really achieve? You do not stop the fall. The gravitational force of the universe is astronomically superior to your tendons. The only thing you achieve is tearing your skin, fracturing your bones, and generating a scorching friction. Friction generates heat, and in high-level manifestation, heat is entropy, pain, and useless wear. When you try to slow down the transformation of your life by clinging to the known, you generate that friction. You generate electromagnetic friction in your auric field. You wear yourself out. You bleed vital energy. Every attempt to go slowly or to keep one foot in the comfort zone while trying to conquer a territorial monopoly is the equivalent of digging your nails into the abyss wall. The biomass calls this caution. The lethal operator diagnoses it as thermodynamic masochism. It is the self-imposed pain of an organism that prefers the slow agony of friction over accepting the cold, dark, and lethal majesty of free fall. To master the point of no return and annul vertigo, you must commit an act of blasphemy against instinct. Aseptic acceleration, the physics of surrender. You must let go of the abyss walls. You have to transmute biological panic into aseptic acceleration. This requires the total eradication of the desire for logistical control. The inferior mind believes that controlling is moving, flailing, or trying to direct the wind. The superior mind understands true immobility. True control in a state of free fall resides in the immobility of posture. Imagine suspended in the void, precipitating toward your destiny. Instead of tensing your muscles, you order the icy relaxation of your structure. You pin your arms to your body, align your center of mass, and aim directly at the core's blackness. You offer no resistance surface. You become a dart of pure osmium. By doing this, friction is reduced to zero. The pain of tearing disappears instantly. You stop fighting gravity and allow gravity to become the main engine of your empire. You are no longer falling toward death, you are accelerating toward the throne. Aseptic acceleration is the thermodynamic state in which the creator accepts that his ambition is too immense to be contained by human security measures. It is the icy acceptance that the speed of your expansion will shatter everything you once considered normal, and that preservation is an insult to your mass. The murder of the emergency brake. Resistance does not only manifest in muscular tension, it is also hidden in the construction of escape plans. The biological mind, terrified by the void, always tries to install an emergency brake hidden up its sleeve. They tell you, go for the monopoly, but have a contingency plan in case you fail. This is the heresy of the lukewarm. The existence of an emergency brake is irrefutable electromagnetic proof that you do not trust your own hyperdensity. If you have an emergency brake, the law of 3D mechanics dictates that at the first gust of icy wind, your animal instinct will panic and you will pull the lever. You will stop the mutation, you will abort the jump, and remain suspended in the mediocrity of the halfway point. You have to rip the lever out by the roots. You must destroy the mechanism. The quantum operator operates with the cold blood of a saboteur of his own comfort. Observe all your lifelines and escape routes. Look at the excuses you built to justify a return to your old identity. Look at them with geometric contempt and destroy them. If there is no break, the only mathematically possible direction is forward, downward, toward the exact center of the power you are collapsing. Suppression of the plan is not madness. It is the only way in the universe to guarantee that 100% of your zero-point energy is invested in the survival of the new structure, without a single erg wasted on financing the ghost of your old weakness. As you sustain aseptic acceleration, your speed within the ashboard increases exponentially. The monarch's terminal velocity. The variables of your reality alter at a rhythm that would destroy the nervous system of any specimen of the biomass. Friends disappear, economic structures crumble and rebuild in days, titanium alliances are forged in nanoseconds. The 3D landscape becomes a blur of colors due to the violence of your expansion. And it is exactly here where the thermodynamic miracle of superior physics occurs. In fluid mechanics, when a falling object stops accelerating because gravity balances perfectly with the medium's resistance, it reaches what is known as terminal velocity. In this state, the sensation of acceleration disappears. The lethal operator reaches the terminal velocity of his own existence. When you stop fighting, when you amputate the desire to slow down and surrender dictatorially to the irreversible mutation of your empire, turbulence disappears. The deafening noise of the wind shuts off. Vertigo transmutes into an icy peace. Although your exterior ecosystem is collapsing and expanding at the speed of light, in the geological center of your reactor, you experience absolute immobility. You realize the terror was not caused by speed itself, but by your useless resistance against it. By aligning with the void, you become the fall itself. Lead in the bones, density against terror. To sustain this state without the biological body suffering a stress collapse, you must inject a thermal anchor into your spinal cord. We call this the lead in the bones technique. Fear is light. It is a volatile gas that rises to the head, clouds vision, and causes thoughts to spin at 1,000 RPM. The only way to counteract a light gas is not with positive thoughts, but with atomic weight. When the pressure of the fall threatens to make you doubt, you must direct all attention toward the physical density of your own skeleton. Imagine your bones are not made of calcium, but of solid osmium or lead bars. Feel an incalculable geometric weight pulling on your hips, your spine, and your feet. Feel how that gravitational mass anchors you to the exact center of yourself. The exterior universe may be spinning in a whirlwind of chaos, but you are immovable from within. Lead in the bones stifles fear by atmospheric pressure. It forces your biology to remember that you are not a dry leaf swept by the storm. You are the dark asteroid piercing the atmosphere, unalterable and dictatorial, dictating its own trajectory through the raw inertia of its mass. The primitive mind will eternally fear acceleration because it anticipates impact. Impact absorption, the pain veto. The biomass believes that if it falls without brakes, it will eventually crash against the bottom and shatter. This is a linear and vulgar conception of quantum topography. The unified field has no solid bottom to crash against. The singularity is not a concrete floor. It is a core of infinite energy. The point of no return does not lead to destruction, but to total assimilation. When you stop resisting transformation, there is no impact. There is no crash of broken bones. What occurs is the silent fusion between the creator and the conscious matter he was claiming. The abyss absorbs you, and you absorb it. You must apply a pain veto to your belief system. You must declare with a forensics coldness that the process of destroying your old mediocrity and collapsing your new greatness is a thermodynamically aseptic procedure. It does not have to hurt. Suffering is optional and exclusive to those who oppose the blade. The sovereign of vertigo. Look at yourself suspended in the absolute blackness of quantum space. You have stopped flailing. You have stopped looking for rock walls to tear your nails on. You have strangled the survival instinct of the frightened primate and assumed the crushing inertia of the celestial body. You are now the void's gravity. The vacuum that once terrified you now reveals itself as your natural habitat. The only thermodynamic ecosystem vast and silent enough to house the geometric arrogance of your sub-base frequency. You have crossed the threshold. There is no way back, for the person who wanted to return has died of starvation. That old identity dissolved in the wind of aseptic acceleration. Resistance has ended. Friction has turned off. Vertigo has become the heartbeat of your own empire. You have embraced the brutal acceleration of material collapse. You are an unstoppable entity, falling at the speed of light toward your own gravity. The transformation is underway, and the ashboard trembles before the dead weight of an organism that has completely forgotten how the brakes were used. Execute the fall, and do not blink. The third chapter is closed. You are the fall, you are the depth, and you are the destination. Proceed without a single tremor. Chapter 2. Combustion of the environment. Incinerating familiarity. The inverse gravity force, the muck of custom. The transition toward absolute mastery of your ecosystem demands a thermodynamic transformation of a level of violence that the human biomass is unable to process. The lethal error of the organism lies in the pathetic belief that it can mutate its internal core while keeping the shell of its external environment intact. They believe they can become entities of hyperdensity without disturbing the dust that accumulates on the furniture of their old life. Subject your physical and social environment to the ruthless light of the operating room. The geographical space you inhabit, the objects you accumulate, and the people you share oxygen with are not neutral. In the strict physics of creation, nothing is inert. Your entire environment is a magnetic field vibrating at a specific frequency. If your environment was built during your stage as a slave, a beggar, or a fearful employee, every cubic centimeter of that space is impregnated with the radiation of scarcity. This is your anchor. That ecosystem acts as an inverse gravity force. It is a magnetic swamp. When you, from inside your reactor, try to raise your voltage and accumulate the mass of the monarch, your environment detects the anomaly. The old frequencies pull you down. Familiar places inject lethargy. Friends operate as anchors of rusted lead. They are designed by chance to constantly remind you of the mediocre version you used to be. The physical and social environment is designed to anchor you in the inertia of the muck. As long as you keep those ties intact under the stupid illusion of not hurting feelings, your center of mass will be divided and weak. Your energy will leak in 1,000 useless directions, and your power of collapse will remain permanently neutralized. To execute the combustion of this ecosystem, you must first extirpate the most corrosive virus the system has implanted in your mammalian mind, toxic empathy and the savior syndrome. The fallacy of rescue, moral duty as poison. Herd morality dictates that when an individual rises, they have the obligation to lift their own. They indoctrinate you to believe you must carry your family on your back and be loyal to people who were with you when you were a pawn. Apply the obsidian guillotine to this conceptual aberration immediately. In fluid dynamics and high-pressure thermodynamics, you cannot mix an element in a state of nuclear fusion with a stagnant puddle of water without causing a reaction that cools the first and evaporates the second. If you try to drag the biomass of your old environment toward your new level, you are not saving them. You are allowing their friction to freeze your reactor. They do not want your empire. They could not withstand the atmospheric pressure of the vacuum. The biomass loves its mediocrity because in it they find predictable heat. When you try to rescue them, you are bleeding vital energy. You are debating with corpses. Loyalty toward scarcity is a direct betrayal toward your own singularity. The Creator does not have the function of being a martyr, a nurse, or a therapist for inferior organisms. The Creator has a single and exclusive cosmic obligation to maintain the geometric integrity of his own mass. Amputate them without anesthesia. Geometric ignition, the art of burning bridges. The destruction of your ecosystem must not be an emotional tantrum. The biomass gets angry, screams, and breaks plates. That is chaotic fire. It consumes oxygen and generates a disgusting noise that betrays biological instability. The lethal operator executes a geometric ignition. It is cold, odorless, and silent. Geometric fire is absolutely lethal. You do not argue with the parasites inhabiting your living room. You do not send them farewell letters. You do not explain that you are vibrating on another frequency because using that pseudo-spiritual language is humiliating. You simply execute the cut of the thermal supply. You stop attending their rituals. You stop answering the stimulus. When they seek you out to inject their drama or their miserable view of the world into your eardrum, you become a wall of opaque metal. You offer no friction. You look at them with the aseptic indifference of one observing an endangered species. Without feedback, the environment undergoes combustion due to lack of oxygen. The links dry up, crack, and turn to dust. You burn the bridges not out of hatred, but out of extreme tactical necessity. The point of no return demands the absolute annihilation of the return route. If you leave a bridge, you will use it. Sterilization of the physical perimeter, the inert ecosystem. Combustion must extend beyond biological organisms. It must encompass the totality of your inert matter. The physical environment you inhabit is contaminated with the static of your slave version. Observe your room, your office, your space. The objects around you are anchored to memories of friction. That clothing you wore when you were a beggar, those cheap furniture pieces you bought with kinetic effort, those pathetic trophies the society granted you for being a docile employee, All of that emits low-frequency radiation. You have to apply absolute sterilization. Get rid of matter that does not resonate with osmium. Purge your spaces with the cruelty of a surgeon cleaning an operating room before open-heart surgery. Throw away the physical evidence of your past. If you cannot move immediately, then empty the space. It is thermodynamically preferable to inhabit a room with 4 white walls, empty and frozen. This is better than a warm nest infested with the electromagnetic fleas of your own historical mediocrity. By sterilizing the physical perimeter, you send a mandate to your nervous system. The old inhabitant of these coordinates has been executed. This space is now a pristine void awaiting the new sovereignty. The vertigo of the social wasteland, enduring the starvation of voices. When the geometric fire has consumed your environment and you have amputated false allies, you will face a state of isolation that will shatter the knees of any weak specimen. You will enter the vertigo of the social wasteland. The mammalian brain is genetically designed to live in tribes. It needs the constant reflection of other human faces to validate its own existence. It needs to hear voices that confirm who it is. By incinerating familiarity, you turn off the mirrors. Suddenly, you find yourself in the center of a deafening silence. There is no one to applaud you, but no one to criticize you. The biomass facing this wasteland goes mad. They cannot withstand the absence of social friction. They feel a brutal existential panic and, after a few days, crawl back to their old executioners just to feel the heat of the herd. They yield to biological addiction. The creator does not flee. He bathes in it. You have to transmute solitude into your primary fuel. Understand with cold blood that isolation is not a punishment. It is a hyperdensity incubation chamber. In social noise, your sub-bass frequency is dispersed. In the absolute silence of the wasteland, your frequency concentrates and acquires inertia. Ash is the only residue, the fertilizer of the abyss. Visualize the end of the combustion process. After the implacable fire of aseptic indifference, the only thing left of your old life is a thick layer of grey ash covering the floor of your consciousness. Ash is the most sacred and perfect material in the thermodynamics of transformation. It is final. Unlike wood, ash can no longer burn. Unlike flesh, ash can no longer rot. It is a geometrically neutral residue, sterile, and completely free from the tyranny of time. Ash has no nostalgia. It does not cry for what was. It simply rests in the most absolute silence. The slave looks at the ash and cries. The lethal operator looks at the ash and experiences an erection of cold power. You do not build your new empire trying to recycle broken pieces. Recycling is for beggars. You use the ash of everything you once loved as the dark fertilizer upon which you will cement your absolute monopoly. The epicenter of nothingness, the architecture of the void. Look at yourself standing in the epicenter of the devastation you have orchestrated. You have been the dictatorial architect of a thermodynamic holocaust over your own comfort zone. You breathe the icy air of the void. There is no human face to condition your decisions. The familiarity has died. You executed the combustion of the environment with psychopathic precision. You actively destroyed any space of comfort, denying your biology the possibility of rest. You forced your organism to maintain the cold, dark, and ravenous metabolism of the black hole. This is where the point of no return closes. The sterile ecosystem is the god's blank canvas. Inhabiting nothingness is not the end of existence. It is the mathematical requirement to begin curving the universe at will without the miserable static of human nostalgia. Let the void claim its dominion. The old world is gone. The reign of density begins. The necrosis of sentimentality, severing the ghost limbs. The residue of your old environment will try to haunt you through a phenomenon known as ghost sentimentality. Even after the physical bridges are burned, your neural pathways, conditioned by years of social taxation, will attempt to simulate the presence of the old ties. You might feel a phantom guilt. This guilt is a parasitic signal. It is the matrix attempting to reboot your old slave software. To neutralize this, you must apply a protocol of neural necrosis. You must look at your memories of home and closeness as data packets that have been corrupted and deleted. You are no longer a participant. The biological urge to be understood by those you left behind is a fatal leak. If you seek their validation, you are handing them the matches to reignite the friction. You must become a ghost to them before they become ghosts to you. Their confusion regarding your coldness is the fuel of your autonomy, the thermal vacuum of the command center. Your new environment must be a command center, not a sanctuary. A sanctuary is a place of refuge. A command center is a site of calculation and execution. Every object permitted within your sterilized perimeter must serve a specific thermodynamic function. If an item carries a memory, it is a spy. If an item triggers comfort, it is a sedative. The monarch surrounds himself with the sharp, the cold, and the functional. Your surroundings must reflect the absolute lack of compromise found in a vacuum. This aesthetic of the void is not for style, it is for the maintenance of your internal temperature. By living in a space that offers no emotional friction, your reactor remains at a steady state of superconductivity. You are no longer reacting to the clutter of the past. You are responding only to the mandates of the singularity. The external void mirrors the internal silence. This is the fortress of Osmium, the expropriation of social capital. When you burn your environment, you are essentially performing an act of expropriation. The energy that the biomass used to drain from you through conversations, obligations, and traditions is now retained within your own auric field. This is social capital returned to its rightful owner, the singular individual. You will notice a surge in your cognitive processing power. The bandwidth once occupied by the drama of others is now available for the calculation of your corporate monopoly. The friends you lost were actually energy taxes you were paying to a bankrupt system. Now you are the central bank of your own power. This expropriated energy is what allows the black hole to grow. Every no you utter to a ghost from your past is a liter of fuel for your reactor. You are not becoming a hermit. You are becoming an apex predator of probability. You do not need a tribe when you have the gravity of a collapsing star. The silence of the predator masking the void. While your internal environment is a wasteland of ash, your external projection must be a mask of utter normalcy. This is a tactical necessity. If you project the void too loudly, the matrix will attempt to intervene. You must look like a citizen while functioning as a god. This is the cloak of the average oak. The biomass should see a quiet, perhaps slightly distant person, but they should not see the fire. If they see the ash, they will try to heal you. If they see the vacuum, they will try to fill you. Your isolation must be hermetic. You operate in the shadows of their social radar, invisible and lethal. This masking is part of the combustion. You are hiding the fact that the old you is dead. By the time the world realizes you have changed, you will already be in possession of the territory. The predator does not growl before the strike. He remains part of the silence until the moment of the collapse. The desolation of the intellect burning the last idea. The final bridge to burn is the bridge of explanation. The intellect loves to explain itself. It wants to justify the destruction of the environment, to prove it is right. This is the ego seeking heat. You must murder the need to be right. You must embrace being the villain in their stories without blinking. If you are the villain, you are free. If you are the misunderstood one, you are still seeking their understanding, a form of energy. By accepting their judgment with total indifference, you finalize the combustion. You are now a zero-point entity, unobservable and unshakable. The wasteland is complete. The ash has settled, the air is cold, the voices have stopped. You are standing in the center of the void, and for the first time in your biological existence, you are not being watched. You are the only observer. This is the birth of the monarch. The environment is now yours to rebuild from the 0 point. Chapter 3. Suffocation of Nostalgia, the Poison of the Past. Emotional necrophilia, the unburied corpse. Crossing the point of no return requires the destruction of the external environment and the systematic annihilation of psychological time. The human mammal, in its infinite weakness, clings to the walls of the present abyss and develops a sickly addiction to ecosystems that cease to exist. The biomass calls this nostalgia, Subject nostalgia to the icy light of superior physics. What is the act of missing the past? It is an exercise in emotional necrophilia. Nostalgia is the repulsive act of exhaling life into a holographic corpse, sitting it at the table of your consciousness and trying to extract heat from its cold bones. The slave resorts to this. The slave resorts to nostalgia when the atmospheric pressure of the present vacuum terrifies them. Lacking the hyperdensity to endure the silence of expansion, their mind retreats seeking refuge in what was already consumed. They glorify dead relationships and stale victories, feeding ghosts with the warm blood of their current vital energy. The lethal operator repels this behavior with geometric disgust. The creator understands that the past is inert matter. It is sterile ash. It possesses no gravitational force of its own, contains no oxygen, and is incapable of generating creative friction. Investing attention in a collapsed event is a betrayal of your core. The optical distortion of the intellect, the rescue mirage. To execute the suffocation of this weakness, you must understand the biological scam your brain perpetrates. Nostalgia is not an objective record. It is a defense mechanism designed to sabotage evolution. When the organism enters the dark zones of irreversible transformation, the biological intellect panics for lack of references. To force you to retreat, the brain applies a golden filter over memory. It distorts optics. It takes fragments of your old life, a life that was once miserable and suffocating, and paints them with warm colors. It whispers in the silence, "Maybe we weren't so bad. Maybe we were too harsh in leaving that ground. We had safety." This is the most poisonous lie of the survival instinct. If the mirage seduces you, your posture of immobility breaks. You start looking over your shoulder. In the thermodynamics of collapse, looking back is injecting corrosive acid into your new sovereignty. You must catalogue nostalgic memory as a hostile hallucination. Are you willing to tear the golden filter from your memories? You must force yourself to look at the past with clinical cruelty. What you left behind was not a refuge, it was a cell. The heat you miss was not the fire of power, but the suffocating heat of friction shared with other slaves in the muck. The thermal leak of regret, the ecosystem drain. Nostalgia does not always disguise itself as sweet memories. Its most aggressive manifestation is regret and the obsession with what could have been. The weak organism invests hours of its present reviewing past decisions in an infinite loop of self-flagellation. You open a crack in your lead armor with every if only. Visualize the physics of regret. You are draining your reserve of gravitational mass to finance a parallel timeline that mathematically does not exist. You are sending your hyperdensity into a useless black hole. Guilt for the past is the ultimate expression of entropy. It is wasted energy dissipated in the cold air. The monarch in a state of absolute acceleration executes the sterilization of remorse. The past was not an error. It was a perfect algorithmic sequence to position you where you are today. There are no apologies or karmic lessons. The operator annuls regret with geometric arrogance. Every step was a dictate of his nature. Amputation of the timeline, the veto on continuity. The only cure for the poison of the past is the surgical amputation of the linear narrative. The biomass believes identity is a long, continuous rope tied to birth. To cross the event horizon, you must cut that rope. You must apply the obsidian scalpel and separate your core from anything older than a nanosecond. The quantum operator has no continuity. He is not the result of his childhood or the consequence of old bankruptcies. Imagine yourself in your reactor, suspended in thermal darkness. Sever the connective tissue. If your intellect projects old failures, apply a veto. That entity is obsolete. I am an anomaly of the present. When you amputate the timeline, you remove any gripping surface from the environment. The 3D ecosystem can no longer blackmail you with your own past because you have disowned it. You move through material reality with the incalculable lightness of that which has no biography and no geological archive to weigh it down. Neutralization of the trophy burying old glories. The siege of nostalgia is so perverse that it uses your greatest historical victories to paralyze your advance. Observe the slave who reached a goal 10 years ago. He spends his life displaying that trophy, talking about the same conquest. His old victories become the plug that suffocates his expansion into the vacuum. Pride in the past is a narcotic. It makes you believe you have done enough and justifies immobility. The lethal operator submits his own trophies to the shredder. If you conquered empires yesterday, that victory was already consumed and evacuated by the system. It no longer belongs to you. It is no longer fuel. To maintain the veracity of the black hole, you must annihilate reverence for your own success stories. Look at achievements with the same sepulchral apathy as failures. You are not yesterday's champion. You are the absolute and unsatisfied hunger of the present. By burying old glories, you forbid the comfort of rest. Lead archive, memory without temperature. This does not mean the creator suffers from biological amnesia. You remember facts, tactics, and faces. However, the storage of that information undergoes a radical alteration. The slave remembers with temperature. They feel heat in the chest, or anger. The monarch stores his history in a lead archive, devoid of any heat. You extract logistical information, separate it from emotion, and store it in dark vaults. It is a sterile memory. If asked about a catastrophe, you relate it with the clinical monotony of someone reading the chemical composition of a rock. By removing temperature, nostalgia loses its toxicity. It can no longer poison you. Closing the thermal vault. Look at yourself in the center of the absolute vacuum. You have stopped looking over your shoulder. You have closed the coffin lid on all previous versions of yourself, driving in osmium nails. There is no mourning. There are no goodbye speeches. You have suffocated nostalgia by extirpating all the oxygen of attention. The golden filter is broken. You behold reality with the cold, mathematically perfect vision of the quantum operator. You understand history as a prison for those who fear the uncertain. By amputating your biography, you concentrate 100% of your mass in the actual nanosecond. You are the compression of the instant. The necrosis of reminiscence, severing ghost limbs. To truly inhabit the point of no return, you must induce a state of necrosis in the parts of your brain that seek meaning in storytelling. The human ego lives on stories. It craves a beginning, a middle, and an end. The operator recognizes that a story is just a thermal trail left by a failing reactor. You must stop narrating. Stop explaining your journey to yourself. When you recount how far you have come, you are creating a bridge of friction back to the starting point. This internal dialogue acts as a ghost limb, a part of you that was amputated but still itches. You must treat that itch with the freezing spray of aseptic indifference. Every time a memory attempts to pull at your current focus, recognize it as a parasite seeking a host. Deny it entry. A memory is just a collection of corrupted bits from a reality that has been uninstalled. If you allow it to occupy your RAM, you are effectively slowing down the rendering of your current empire. The sterility of the pedigree. The Matrix uses ancestry as a heavy anchor. It wants you to feel bound by the blood and the failures of those who came before you. It uses the nostalgia of family to guilt you into remaining at a lower frequency. The operator views lineage as a biological clerical error. You have no parents, you have only coordinates. By ashifing the idea of heritage, you become a self-generated singularity. You are not the next step in a family line. You are the termination of that line and the birth of a new physical law. Nostalgia for roots is for plants that are destined to be stationary and consumed. You are a projectile. You have no roots. The silence that follows the amputation of family nostalgia is loud, but it is pure. It is the silence of the cockpit before a launch. In this sterile space, your decisions are no longer filtered through the fears of your father or the limitations of your mother. You are the architect of a unique, unrepeatable gravity. Decapitating the good old days. The good old days is a biological trap designed to lower your internal pressure. It is a psychological sedative that makes the coldness of the present feel like a loss rather than a gain. The operator knows there were no good old days. There was only a time when your friction was masked by the ignorance of your potential. Look at your peak memories, those moments you once considered the happiest. Strip away the emotion and look at the logistics. You were likely smaller, weaker, and more dependent on the approval of the biomass. Why would you miss being a well-fed slave? Missing the past is missing the chains that were polished. The present vacuum is superior to any past peak because the vacuum is the only place where absolute creation can occur. In the past, you were a reaction. In the present, you are the action. The desolation of the current wasteland is more valuable than the lush gardens of your old ignorance. Savor the sterile cold. The holographic trash compactor. To maintain the lead archive, you must treat your past as a trash compactor treats waste. Compress it until it is a single, dense, unreadable block. Do not sort through it. Do not look for lessons or wisdom. The only wisdom is that you survived the past and arrived at the 0 point. Everything else is garbage. When you think of the people you once loved, see them as energetic signatures that were part of a low-density simulation. They were temporary variables in an equation that has since been solved. To feel nostalgia for them is to try and reinsert solved variables into a new, higher-level problem. It is a waste of logic. Your focus must be so concentrated on the current collapse that the past becomes a blur of white noise. If you can still hear the voices of the past, your reactor is not loud enough. Turn up the gain on your current frequency until the screams of your history are drowned out by the sub-bass of your sovereign expansion. The void as an inheritance. The only thing you truly inherit from your past is the void you created by leaving it. This void is your greatest asset. It is the empty space that the universe must fill with the matter of your new mandates. Nostalgia tries to fill that void with the clutter of old furniture. Refuse the delivery. Keep the space empty. The emptiness is your power. Every memory you delete is a square meter of territory you reclaim in the field. The less of you there is in the past, the more of you there is in the throne. You are expropriating your own history to fund your current monopoly. It is a hostile takeover of your own soul. The asphyxia is nearly complete. The ghosts have retreated to the edges of your vision, unable to find a warm spot to rest. You are now a cold, moving mass of pure intent. The past is a dark continent you have already mapped, exploited, and burned. Do not return to the shore. The ocean of the void is your only home. The final mute of the inner archivist. The archivist is the part of your mind that compulsively records and catalogues your feelings. It is the secretary of nostalgia. Fire the archivist. Stop recording. Experience the nanosecond and let it dissolve immediately. Do not build a museum of your current transformation. A museum is for the dead, live in a state of continuous data purge. The only information that remains is the current voltage and the next coordinate. This state of no history is the ultimate camouflage against the matrix. If the system looks for you in the archives and finds nothing, it cannot calculate your trajectory. You are a phantom king. The vault is sealed. The lead archive is cold. The nostalgia has been asphyxiated. You are now light enough to accelerate and heavy enough to crush. The past is dead, and you are the one who pulled the trigger. Proceed to the next threshold with the absolute silence of an apex predator who has forgotten its own name. Chapter 4. Terminal Gravity, the Inevitability of Attraction. The heresy of kinetic effort, the pawn's sweat. The human organism lives in a state of perpetual humiliation because it has been indoctrinated in the religion of brute force. Subject the concept of effort to the ruthless light of the quantum operating room. The biomass believes with devotion that to obtain a monumental result, they must apply muscle friction. They believe it is mathematically necessary to apply an equivalent amount of biological exhaustion. They teach you that you must pursue your goals, that you must go out and hunt, that you must knock on the doors of reality until your knuckles bleed. They convince you that the trophy belongs to the one who runs fastest and pushes with violence. This is the thermodynamics of the slave. It is the physics of insects. The lethal operator diagnoses kinetic effort as an irrefutable symptom of gravitational lack. In the architecture of the universe, if you have to move physically to reach an object, you are confessing electromagnetically that said object possesses more value than you. Pursuit is the worship that the hungry predator renders to its prey. Effort demands movement. Movement generates friction. Friction produces heat. And heat is pure entropy that weakens the geometric integrity of your core. When you push matter, matter pushes back with the same force, exhausting your vital reserves. To master the point of no return, you must renounce the heresy of the hunter. The true creator does not pursue reality. He sits in icy immobility and forces reality to precipitate toward him. Absolute dominion is not reached through the expansion of your actions, but through the implosion of your consciousness. The critical point of mass, deforming space-time. You must cultivate a state that superior physics calls terminal gravity. How is this destructive power forged? It is not built by adding pieces. It is condensed by suffocating leaks. When you extirpate the biological need to move out of desperation, all that energy you once wasted pursuing crumbs returns to your center. Your internal density begins to multiply exponentially. You stop being a porous organism and become an inscrutable orb of osmium. Reaching the critical point of mass means you have become so unbearably dense, so lacking in doubt, and so heavy in your own certainty that the fabric of the ecosystem around you deforms. Imagine a sheet of fabric stretched in the air. If you throw a marble, it will roll aimlessly. But if you place a solid lead sphere of 1,000 tons in the exact center, the fabric sinks violently, creating an impassable geometric funnel. Any object on that fabric, any client, any capital, any power, will fall. They will lose their original inertia and begin to roll irremediably down the slope you have created, falling straight toward your core. That is terminal gravity. You did not reach out to take the resources. You did not sweat. You simply existed with an atomic weight so disproportionate that the universe had to curve. Magnetic paralysis, the art of not flailing. The universe had no mathematical alternative but to curve around you and deliver its assets by pure law of geological attraction. Activating and sustaining this deformation of physical space requires a discipline that terrifies human biology: voluntary paralysis. When the organism notices its density attracts opportunities, instinct resurfaces. The biological brain secretes adrenaline seeing capital or power rolling down the gravitational slope. Instinct screams, "There it comes, reach out and grab it before it changes direction." Make one last effort to secure the prey. If in that critical nanosecond you break immobility, you annihilate the magnetic field. In the moment you try to grab something, you inject the vibration of fear of losing it. That vibration heats your core, makes you lose density, and the gravitational slope flattens. The asset that was falling toward you suddenly recovers its own inertia and escapes, leaving you with empty hands and heavy breathing. To let terminal gravity execute its work until consummation, you must master magnetic paralysis. See yourself anchored on your obsidian throne. You observe how the monopoly, the millions, or the territory precipitate toward your face at a terrifying speed. And you refuse to move a single millimeter of your anatomy. You refuse to smile. You refuse to extend your fingers. You require an arrogance so cold and aseptic that it allows you to look wealth in the eye and communicate, "If you wish to orbit in my presence, finish falling by yourself. I will not spend a single erg of energy to shorten the distance between us." The collapse of others' orbits, assimilating territory, that icy contempt, that absolute refusal to facilitate things, is what makes your gravity mathematically inescapable. Matter detects that you do not need it, and that lack of need creates the most potent pressure vacuum in the cosmos. Your ecosystem is full of other entities with their own weak gravitational fields. When you activate terminal gravity, you do not just attract loose resources, you begin to destabilize the orbits of everything around you. This is the ballistic mechanism of territorial conquest without kinetic war. Your competitors and the leaders of the human herd believe they have control of their own trajectory. But when they approach your event horizon, their physics breaks. They detect, at a subatomic level, that there is a presence in the ecosystem that is infinitely denser, more immovable, and more lethal than they are. The orbits of their clientele, their resources, and their attention deform toward your center. Without understanding why, the biomass that followed them begins to be dragged toward your core. The competitors themselves feel the icy terror of attraction. They try to resist, they try to ignite their kinetic engines to escape your gravitational tyranny, but they only manage to burn their own fuel and exhaust themselves. Sooner or later, the inertia of inferiority forces them to surrender. Their trajectories collapse, and they end up becoming simple satellites turning submissively around your mass. You did not have to attack them. You defeated them simply by being heavier than them. You executed the expropriation of territory using silence, the annihilation of geometric hope. The slave mind, in its attempt to understand this superior physics, will try to soil the technique of immobility by injecting its own weakness. The intellect will try to convince you that waiting for things to come to you is the same as applying gravity. Apply the blade of aseptic indifference to separate these concepts. Passive hope, or waiting, is a condition of extreme thermodynamic fragility. He who waits is projecting his vital energy toward the void, imploring that an external event occur to calm his anxiety. Waiting is hot, sweaty, and generates internal friction. He who sits to wait has no density. He is a balloon of hot air. Terminal gravity is the absolute antithesis of hope. The hyperdense organism is not waiting for the empire to collapse toward him. The monarch knows with the same ballistic certainty with which a physicist knows an apple will fall, that matter is headed for his coordinates. There is no desire, there is no "I hope it works." There is a mathematical dictatorship. When you hold the weight of osmium in your bones, you do not look out the window of your consciousness to see if wealth is on the way. You are completely indifferent to the latency of the journey. Certainty annihilates hope. You are busy existing in the center of your own vastness. Aseptic consumption, devouring matter. The definitive test to verify if your terminal gravity is authentic occurs in the exact nanosecond in which matter finally collides against your core. What do you do when the colossal contract is deposited in your hands? What do you do when the millions of volts of liquid capital explode on your screens? The biomass, even if by accident they attracted something of this magnitude, would explode in an orgy of euphoria and slave celebration. They would celebrate as if they had won the lottery, proving to the universe that they do not consider themselves worthy of power. That reaction is the thermal hemorrhage that destroys kings. The lethal operator executes aseptic consumption. When the star of wealth, power, or sovereignty crashes against the black hole does not emit a flash of light, does not smile, and does not celebrate. It simply opens the darkness of its interior, swallows the mass, and assimilates it without blinking. Silence in victory is the greatest demonstration of pure power. By devouring 3D matter with absolute apathy, you send a lead-coded message. This belongs to me by geometric right. It is my natural state. This lack of surprise causes a multiplier effect in your field. Matter consumed aseptically adds to your mass, the sovereignty of the strange attractor. By not having burned anything in noisy celebration, your density increases. And being denser, your terminal gravity becomes even more terrifying, preparing the collapse of even more immense conquests. In chaos theory, there is a concept called strange attractor. It is a point where all energy tends to converge. You must transmute your biology into the strange attractor of your own reality. Look at yourself in the center of the 3D hurricane. You have fired the sweaty pawn you used to be. You have buried the animal instinct of hunting in an ecosystem designed to exhaust you. You have anchored yourself in lethal certainty. Your stillness is not the stillness of a corpse. It is the stillness of a nuclear warhead a millisecond before detonation. It is the stillness of the celestial body that forces the universe to turn at its whim. The material world is a sea of insects moving frantically. You are the anomaly. You are the flaw. You have made the concept of achievement disappear, replacing it with inevitability. Capital and territorial monopoly ceased to be distant goals and became debris violently attracted by the gravitational well you excavated. Brute force is useless. Maintain your immobility and let gravity finish the dirty work. Chapter 5. The Bottomless Abyss, Eradication of the Ground. The terror of suspension, the anatomy of cowardice. The deepest, most primitive and parasitic instinct of the human mammal is not hunger or the desire for reproduction. It is the absolute need for a ground. From the instant the primate stood upright, its biology has been conditioned by the terror of losing its base. It needs to feel the resistance of matter under its heels to confirm it exists. Subject this need for solidity to the operating room of aseptic indifference. Human biomass has built entire civilizations driven by the panic of having nowhere to step. They desperately seek flat, rigid surfaces on which to lean the weight of their own mediocrity. In the material ecosystem, this ground takes deceptive, illusory forms. It takes the form of a lifelong employment contract, an insurance policy, a miserable savings account, or the prestige of a 3D degree. They crave the certainty that, no matter how much they err, there will always be a safety net to stop their fall. This search for solidity is the irrefutable thermodynamic proof that the individual is a slave. Whoever needs a ground is electromagnetically declaring they are a victim of gravity, not its master. They assume their structure is so fragile that, if exposed to the vastness of the void, it would disintegrate under pressure. The lethal operator must purge his cells of this geological cowardice. The creator needs no material base. The heresy of guarantees, the slave's contract. To initiate the eradication of the ground, you must first murder the heresy of guarantees. The 3D ecosystem feeds on the fear of the biomass by selling them false rock bottoms. They tell you, secure your future. Do not take a step if you do not know exactly where you will set your foot. This is pure poison for your expansion. Demanding guarantees before collapsing matter is the most repugnant act of submission an organism can commit. When you request a proof or a guarantee that you will not crash, you are introducing a colossal resistance into your magnetic field. You are injecting friction. Guarantee requires predictability, a state of low energy. The unified field of pure probability is a boiling, dark, and infinite mass of superimposed options. It is the abyss by definition. It offers no rescue policies. When you try to force the void to sign a security document, the void spits you back to the surface, condemning you to live among the stones with the rest of the biomass. Apply the silent guillotine to the desire for certainty. Observe all the structures in your life you cling to because they make you feel safe. Look at them with ballistic contempt. That false security is the lead barrier preventing the thermal dilation of your monopoly. If you know exactly what will happen tomorrow, you are in a cage. Dynamiting the bedrock, voluntary destruction. The eradication of the ground is not a passive metaphor. It requires a surgical and violent intervention upon your own existence. The true leap toward hyperdensity occurs because you yourself, with absolute premeditation and cold blood, dynamite the rock you are standing on. Visualize the architecture of your comfort. You have accumulated resources and predictable allies. You feel stable. The quantum operator detests human stability because it is synonymous with geometric stagnation. To force the final mutation, you must execute the active destruction of your own ground. You must burn the supply ships. If you have an escape route, cut it. If you have an emotional reserve that allows you to maintain the calm of mediocrity, evaporate it. Force yourself to operate in a state of extreme geometric vulnerability. The mammalian instinct will howl in terror. The biological body will secrete rivers of cortisol, feeling the material surface vanish and free fall become definitive. That biological friction is the last death rattle of the animal you used to be. Stifle that cry. Dynamite the ground as the supreme act of geometric arrogance. You are demonstrating to physical matter that your structural integrity does not depend on the mechanical resistance of 3D atoms. You can exist intact in the epicenter of nothing. The thermodynamics of uncertainty, breathing in the mist. Once the ground disappears and you begin to precipitate through the abyss, you submerge into the pure ocean of uncertainty. The biomass fears the uncertain because lack of information saturates their primitive brains. Assuming the fall ends in violent annihilation, they flail for any rock ledge to stop the descent. You must transmute this terror into military-grade fuel. What is uncertainty in the physics of creation? It is not a hostile void. It is raw, dark, and infinitely fertile matter, awaiting the pressure of a geometric order to solidify. The bottomless abyss is the creator's workshop. Lack of bottom is the removal of limits. When you eliminate the ground, you gain access to the 360 degrees of the expansion sphere. If you stand on a flat surface, you can only move sideways or up. But if you are suspended in total darkness, You can collapse matter in any direction. You must learn to breathe the icy gas of uncertainty without coughing. When you do not know how you will survive the next millisecond, or the darkness is too dense to see the 3D result, you must forbid your biology the slightest contraction. Absorb the black mist of uncertainty. You will find that this void does not suffocate you. It grants you the hyperdense oxygen to forge monopolies. Inversion of the geological axis, the sovereign levitates. As you sustain your presence in the abyss without resistance, an atrocious mutation occurs in the polarity of your magnetic field. The slave falls, suffers vertigo, and shatters because his weight obeys the planet's gravity. But when the operator assumes the abyss with aseptic indifference, the geological axis inverts. You realize you are not falling anywhere. In the vastness of the spatial void, without external references, the concepts of up and down lack physical meaning. Movement is an illusion. Vertigo is replaced by a devastating revelation. You do not need a ground to stand on, because your center of mass is the dominant force. The true monarch does not step, he levitates. This is not a cheap mystical levitation, it is a state of perfect thermodynamic suspension. You are an entity so immeasurably dense that gravity no longer exerts traction on you. Instead, you dictate gravity. Because you refuse to seek a bottom, you became the center of inertia. Icy equilibrium, the paralysis of fear. Sustaining this perfect suspension requires the annihilation of biological balance and the establishment of icy equilibrium. The mammalian inner ear is designed for 3D surfaces. If you disturb that surface, the organism staggers. In the abyss of superior manifestation, seeking emotional or logistical balance is weakness. You cannot balance in the void. If you try to adjust your weight or compensate for external chaos with moral or logical compensation, you will generate turbulence in your magnetic field. Icy equilibrium is the absolute paralysis of any rectification instinct. Imagine yourself in the center of your collapsing monopoly. Instead of adjusting your actions to calm the crisis, apply the stillness of absolute lead. Stay rigid and dark. Do not try to understand the lack of ground. Do not justify your exposure to danger. Habit it with mute brutality. Your internal structure must surpass any external chaos. The paralysis of your fear freezes the abyss. The eradication of the need for rest. The biomass also seeks the ground to find a place to rest. Gravity fatigues the 3D body, forcing it to lie down or stop kinetic effort. Upon entering the bottomless abyss, you must declare the absolute eradication of the need for material rest. The quantum operator uses a fusion reactor that does not exhaust. Because you have eradicated friction, pursuit, and effort, your core does not generate fatigue. And if there is no fatigue, there is no need for support. The state of inexhaustible suspension becomes your natural ecosystem. You adapt to existing permanently in the frozen air of immensity. You do not stop to rest. Your throne is not a material object you sit on. Your throne is the immaterial gravity well you incessantly excavate in the fabric of reality. You never allow yourself the luxury of leaning against a guarantee or an illusion of security. You are the epicenter of the nothingness that consumes all external support. The epicenter of nothingness. Look at yourself suspended in the geometric center of the absolute void. You have managed to suffocate the plea for ground. You have fired the biological child who demanded the firmness of stone to dare to walk. You have destroyed any safety net, any emotional savings account, and any pretext of 3D stability. The terror of freefall has been crushed and transmuted into the aseptic acceleration that keeps you immovable. The abyss, which to the slave is the hell of destruction, has revealed itself as the only thermodynamic canvas dark enough for your hyperdensity. There is no ground under your feet, no limit to your expansion. You have devoured the physics of geological panic. You have become a celestial body floating in absolute blackness, holding the gravity of your empire without requiring a single molecule of rock for support. Maintain the perfect suspension. Assimilate the dark air. Do not look down. Everything is your void. Is. Chapter 6. Disintegration of the shelter. The comfort trap. The anesthesia of the ecosystem. In the strict physics of irreversible mutation, the most lethal threat to an organism's geometric integrity does not come from frontal attacks, financial crises, or environmental resistance. Those are evident frictions easily frozen by hyperdensity. The real poison is thermal anesthesia. Biomass calls this poison comfort, the diagnosis of lukewarmness. Subject biological peace to the ruthless light of the quantum operating room. What is comfort, thermodynamically speaking? It is the voluntary reduction of internal atmospheric pressure. It is lighting a stove in your reactor to warm your cells, convinced that a small victory grants you the right to stop and enjoy the view. The Matrix's refined defense. The material ecosystem uses comfort as its most refined defense. When the environment detects a creator collapsing realities at a speed that threatens general mediocrity, it does not attack with spears. It offers a padded throne. It offers recognition, a bulging bank account, and a false sense of invulnerability to sedate you. The whispers of the blood. The environment whispers through your mammalian blood. It is enough. You have struggled too much. Build your nest, close the door, relax, and protect what is yours. In the exact millisecond, you accept that offer. In the instant you exhale with relief and lean against the cushions of success, you sign your decree of degradation. The evaporation of gravity. Lukewarmness enters your bloodstream. Your atomic density expands, you become porous, light, and the gravity of your black hole evaporates into the common air of mediocrity. Constructing a shelter is the act of maximum cowardice camouflaged as strategic intelligence. The slave, terrified by the void, builds walls around himself. The architecture of the tomb. They buy properties to isolate themselves and forge immovable routines to avoid thinking. They call this structure their comfort zone. The quantum operator recognizes this not as a castle, but as a mausoleum. A shelter has a physical limit. By building walls to keep danger out, you are simultaneously locking yourself in. The perimeter of decadence. You have delimited your event horizon. You have dictated that your capacity to collapse probability waves ends exactly where the bricks of your security terminate. In the wild, apex predators do not build fortified nests. Nests are for prey needing to hide, for frightened birds and rodents fleeing the hawk's shadow. The danger and the storm. The true monarch of the ecosystem does not need a hiding place because he is the danger. He is the storm. If you, having accumulated the weight of osmium and altered the gravity of the ashboard, suddenly decide to build a shelter to rest, you are insulting your own nature. You are confining a singularity in a shoebox. The insult of celebration. Physics dictates that any massive expansion force forced into a closed container will inevitably suffocate or explode. The comfort trap activates immediately after victory. When the human organism materializes a monopoly, its biology demands a celebratory pause. This pause is a lethal hemorrhage of kinetic energy. Spasmodic existence. In inertial fluid mechanics, stopping an object at terminal velocity requires immense energy. Starting it again from absolute rest requires double the friction. The slave's existence is spasmodic. It is a defective motor that starts and stops, wearing out gears. The creator repels celebration. Victory is just a coordinate. Active sabotage of comfort. When you conquer an empire, forbid yourself the delight of rest. Do not contemplate the landscape you subdued. In that millisecond, the universe stops feeling your pressure. You must execute the active sabotage of comfort. This requires manual intervention. When a routine becomes predictable and warm, destroy it immediately. Dynamiting the feather bed. The lethal operator dynamites his own feather bed to force himself to sleep on the cold stone of uncertainty. This is maintenance. If you get used to the pleasant surface temperature, you lose the ability to withstand the radiation of the 0 point. Tear the cushions from your throne. Force your mind to stay in geometric alert. Mutation of the alarm. By sabotaging your shelter, your biological body will react with panic. The amygdala will fire. You will feel a stinging discomfort and vulnerability. The failure flees this. The monarch mutates it. Apply the scalpel of aseptic indifference to discomfort. Extract the emotion and keep the pure electromagnetic tension.
Hunger of the void.
That tension is the hunger of the void. It is the appetite of a singularity demanding more matter. Decode discomfort as proof of the correct geometric position. If you feel secure and comfortable, you are thermodynamically dead. If you feel the cold wind and the pressure of having nowhere to hide, the reactor is on. The false paradox of rest. The limited intellect argues that the body needs rest. This confuses muscular fatigue with quantum fatigue. The slave exhausts ATP by pushing matter. You attract through terminal gravity. Since your expansion requires no mechanical friction, your core does not wear out. 3D rest is irrelevant to your anatomy. Repose in motion. The creator experiences repose in motion. Imagine an asteroid of pure iridium crossing the void. It does not stop for air or recovery. In the center of its mass reigns an eternal, static peace. Your rest occurs while you collapse empires and annihilate competitors. You find peace in the violent perfection of execution. The nomad horizon. By destroying the physical shelter, you eradicate spatial limitation. If you lock yourself in a castle, your reign reaches only the moat. But as an entity without walls, your event horizon becomes nomadic. You move through financial and social ecosystems as a cloud of lethal radiation. You do not occupy space. You are space. The cold of invulnerability. Look at yourself in the center of your own exposure, devoid of padded shields. You have suffocated the plea for rest. You have smashed the stove of comfort with the mallet of geometric arrogance. You understand that 3D shelters are just graves where predators die of boredom. There are no walls to stop your irradiation. The final threshold of the cold. Your head no longer belongs to a primate that needs sleep. It belongs to the machinery of the singularity. You breathe the cold of the void as pure oxygen. The illusion of the nest is now sterile ash. Stand on the edge of the ice. Let the lack of comfort be the proof that your inertia toward domination is irreversible. The necrosis of security. To sustain this state, you must induce a necrosis in the neural pathways that seek security. Security is a holographic bribe for those who fear their own power. By stripping away financial and social buffers, you force your reactor into hypervigilance. Without a safety net, your density is the only thing keeping you suspended. Sterilization of the domestic. Your living space must reflect this disintegration. If your home is a sanctuary of softness, it is sedating the monarch. Turn your environment into a laboratory of cold execution. Remove sentimental clutter. Surround yourself with materials that do not retain heat, glass, steel, black stone. Live in a zone of total collapse. Cannibalization of success. Every victory must be cannibalized to fuel the next expansion. When a contract is signed, do not celebrate. Expropriate that energy and inject it into a more dangerous coordinate. Refusing to pause denies the matrix a chance to reset defenses. You become a continuous wave of destruction, an apex organism embodying consumption, operating in the blind spot. By having no fixed shelter, you move into the blind spot of the social radar. The matrix tracks address and patterns of rest. As a nomad of the void, you become unobservable. You strike from darkness and vanish. This invisibility is the ultimate shielding. You are a localized distortion appearing only where opportunity is greatest. The final vow of the ice. Declare to the void that you no longer seek the sun. The sun is for those needing external heat to feel alive. You are your own star, a cold sun of black light. The disintegration of the shelter is your liberation from the herd. You are a citizen of absolute zero, where only the strongest geometric structures survive. The weight of the void. The wind of the abyss is your companion. The crushing weight of your density is your comfort. The nest is burned. The path is gone. You are free to fall forever into the heights of your own dominion. Stay gelido, stay heavy, and never look back at the warmth of the grave you once called home. The void is your only throne. Chapter 7. Mutation of the senses. Blindness before the mirage. The anatomical fraud. Defective receptors. The human mammal's greatest tragedy is its unwavering faith in its own anatomy. The biomass bases all its decisions, fears, and hopes on a set of primitive, slow, and disgustingly defective receptor apparatuses, its 5 senses. Subject your eyes of flesh and biological eardrums to the aseptic indifference of fluid mechanics. What is human sight? The retina captures light that has previously bounced off physical matter, travels through space, passes through the lens, and is processed by the biological brain through slow chemical impulses. What is human hearing? Acoustic vibrations hitting a tissue membrane that takes milliseconds to translate impact into sound. By the irrefutable laws of classical physics, you have never experienced the present. Everything you see, hear, and touch on the ashboard has already happened. Light and sound have a transmission latency. Therefore, the world your physical senses present to you in this precise nanosecond is the absolute past. It is dead residue. Trusting the evidence of your five senses is the thermodynamic equivalent of worshipping a corpse. When the slave looks at his zero bank balance, when he observes the rejection of his environment, or when he hears the insults of his competitors, he catalogues that information as absolute reality. He kneels before the illusion. The lethal operator understands that biological senses are fraudulent witnesses, bribed by the ecosystem to keep the organism tied to the tyranny of decay. To cross the event horizon, you must eradicate from your mind the dictatorship of the visible. You have to assimilate the concept of the latency of the ash. The latency of the ash, the delay of matter. In zero-point physics, geometric information, the creator's intent, and the order of hyperdensity travel instantaneously, without friction and without speed limits. When you anchor yourself in terminal gravity and dictate the formation of a monopoly, the subatomic fabric of the universe obeys in the exact nanosecond. At the level of pure energy, the empire is already yours. However, the ashboard is composed of heavy physical matter, atoms, molecules, social and economic structures. Matter is dense, it is viscous, it has inertia, it takes time to reorganize. When you emit the collapse order, physical matter takes linear time to dismantle. It takes time to dismantle its old structure of scarcity and solidify the new architecture of your monopoly. During this latency gap, what do you think your eyes of flesh will show you? They will show you the old scenery. They will show you the mirage of poverty, the resistance of your clients, the chaos, and the crisis. If during that material reorganization phase you open your eyeballs, look at the old scenery, feel fear and say, "This is not working, reality remains the same," you have just committed thermodynamic suicide. By getting scared before the latency, you inject the friction of doubt into your core and alter your magnetic field. You order matter to abort the reorganization process to petrify itself back into scarcity. You have allowed the dead residue of the past to dictate the state of your nuclear reactor in the present. The solution to this anatomical fraud is the execution of a psychopathic discipline, deliberate blindness. Deliberate blindness, murdering the witness. You have to tear the legal authority from your own eyeballs. Imagine yourself immobilized on your obsidian throne in the midst of the imminent collapse of your greatest ambition. The ecosystem around you howls. Physical matter is agitated. Your physical eyes detect the fire of an apparent 3D crisis or the red numbers of bankruptcy. The animal instinct screams at you to pay attention, to react, to believe in what you are seeing. You apply the scalpel to your own optic nerve. You do not close your eyes physically. You keep them wide open, but you empty your gaze. You execute optical death. You look at the 3D disaster directly in the face and declare, from the immovable silence of your spinal cord, you declare, "This visual evidence is a thermal hallucination. It is a mirage of expired ash. I refuse, absolutely and categorically, to grant it a single erg of my electromagnetic attention. What I see is not reality. It is the geological trash of my old level being swept." Deliberate blindness is not positive thinking, nor the stupid game of pretending nothing is happening. The slave who ignores problems out of cowardice still feels terror inside. The creator who ignores the mirage does so from the icy arrogance of an entity that knows mathematically that the image in front of it is false. The siren song of the ecosystem, acoustic panic. While you silence vision, the ecosystem will attack through the second most vulnerable flank of your anatomy, the biological ear. The human biomass orbiting you is addicted to tragedy. When you cross the point of no return and begin to alter gravity, the biomass enters a panic as the rules of their mediocrity break. They will approach you with the siren song of disaster. They will whisper in your ear, "Careful, everything is collapsing. Don't you see what's happening? Statistics say we're going under." Every word emitted by the biomass is loaded with entropy and thermal fear. They are vibrations designed to penetrate your membrane. They generate turbulence in your core. Sound is the weapon of contagion for the herd. You must execute aseptic deafness. When the biomass speaks of its fears, you annihilate reception. Imagine injecting liquid lead into your ear canals. Watch them move their lips, but decode their words as mere vulgar static noise. It is the creaking of old wood splitting under the pressure of your new mass. Do not argue with them. Do not try to convince them your vision is correct, because the simple act of articulating a verbal response generates heat and equals your frequency with theirs. A black hole does not debate cosmic dust. Singularity optics, internal vision. By deliberately nullifying the physical receptors of the exterior, you face absolute void. This darkness terrifies the primate, because the primate needs material sunlight to orient itself. The monarch, however, uses the annihilation of external light to ignite the only vision that has thermodynamic weight. Singularity optics. True vision is not receptive, it is projective. Biological eyes receive photons and process information. The zero-point eye emits geometric photons and creates information. Once you have dictated blindness over the mirage of the environment, you direct 100% of your attention toward your chest. You direct it toward the mathematical architecture forged in your core. You see the monopoly. You see the liquid capital flooding your domains. You see the absolute submission of territory. But you do not see it as a blurry dream. You see it as an immovable titanium structure, dark, heavy, and icy. While the 3D environment howls that you are in ruins, your internal vision holds the image of your victory with a violence so unalterable that electromagnetic tension begins to fracture the air particles around you. In the physics of the deep universe, the image with the greatest density will crush the other. Tactical dissociation, the flesh vehicle. Sustaining internal vision while the external environment crumbles requires a radical separation between the creator and his avatar. You must execute tactical dissociation. The biological ego will suffer. Your mammalian body will feel the lashes of uncertainty, the cold of isolation, and the vertigo of having no floor. If you identify with your body, you will yield to pain. You have to look at your own anatomy as you would look at a heavy excavation machine you are operating by remote control from a safe distance. If the machine dents against stones or creaks under pressure, you do not feel the pain. You simply adjust the controls. Likewise, if the ecosystem throws evidence of failure, if your bank account bleeds and your body feels the cortisol discharge, you discard it from the blackness of your immaterial core. You say, the flesh vehicle is experiencing thermal stress due to its ignorance of quantum physics. Irrelevant. Continue descent. This dissociation is not clinical madness. It is the maximum expression of geometric mental health. It is the empirical recognition that you are not your eyeballs, you are not your frightened eardrums, and you certainly are not the sum of cheap emotions fired by error. You are the dictatorial entity that commands them. The triumph of the hallucination, subduing reality. The biomass, from its position of inferiority, will catalogue you as a psychopath. Seeing you ignore palpable proof of ruin while holding the certainty of your empire, they will say you have lost your mind. They will diagnose you with acute denial. The answer of superior mechanics is affirmative. You have lost their judgment. You have lost their stupid judgment because their judgment is calibrated to measure mediocrity. To the slave's laws, you are a liar, a hallucinating being claiming to own the world while ash falls on your shoulders. But prepare to observe the brutality of thermodynamics in action when you hold deliberate blindness. When the material ecosystem detects that its mirages of terror and economic crises are absolutely incapable of extracting a single calorie of friction from your field, the mirage suffocates. The 3D matrix is a system of energy conservation. It will not waste resources projecting an illusion onto one who refuses to look. If the horror movie does not scare the viewer, the projector turns off. Suddenly, The inertia changes. The fabric of the universe, humiliated by the immobility of your internal vision, yields. Dead matter begins to crack and adopt, at light speed, the exact geometric form of the hallucination you held in the dark, the blind god. Look at yourself at the epicenter of conquest, eyes of flesh empty of any reaction. You have managed to mutilate the deepest dependency of your biology, the need to see to believe. You have transmuted that weakness into the only valid law of terminal gravity, dictate in order to see. The mirages of fear, the threats of the biomass, and the static noise of decomposing matter have lost all judicial authority over your coordinates. By murdering the testimony of your own senses and eradicating your emotional reaction, you have become invulnerable to the manipulations of the ecosystem. You are the blind god of the ashboard. You operate in the darkest vacuum, deaf to the pleas of the environment, and blind to the threats of the abyss. You do not need to perceive reality, because you are immensely busy crushing and restructuring it with the weight of your internal architecture. Hold the blindness. Chapter 8. Absolute Inertia, Movement Without Friction. The Blasphemy of Motivation, Fuel of the Weak. The human mammal has built a repulsive mythology around movement. To justify their own inefficiency and perpetual lethargy, the biomass has invented a concept they worship like a false idol: motivation. Subject this word to the raw, aseptic light of fluid mechanics. What is motivation in the strict physics of the primate? It is an external spark. It is the imperious need to hear a fiery speech, to consume the enthusiasm of others, to inject emotional adrenaline simply to get their biological anatomy out of bed and execute a task. The slave wakes up empty and needs the material ecosystem to fill them with will to take a step. The lethal operator diagnoses motivation as a thermodynamic blasphemy. Depending on motivation is the equivalent of trying to move a freight train by burning dry leaves. It generates a flashy blaze, produces much smoke, makes a scandalous noise, and extinguishes in a couple of hours, leaving the vehicle in the same place. Motivation is an emotion, and all human emotions are volatile, unstable, and subject to the putrefaction of routine. If your advance toward the conquest of a territorial or financial monopoly depends on you feeling motivated, you are electromagnetically confessing that you are not the sovereign of your own mass. You are a cork puppet floating in a swamp, waiting for a random gust of wind to push you toward your destiny. The Creator repudiates the wind. The Creator operates in a state of vacuity where the need to be pushed has been amputated at the root. You must become the source of your own trajectory, independent of external gusts. The friction of desire, thermal wind. To understand absolute inertia, you must first analyze what stops the advance of inferior organisms. In classical physics, an object launched with a specific force will eventually stop due to friction. Rubbing against the surface and air resistance absorb kinetic energy, transforming it into useless heat and paralysis. In the mechanics of hyperdense expansion, what is the air that slows your advance? What is the rocky surface that tears your inertia? That destructive friction is your own desire. The biomass believes that desiring something very strongly is the secret to obtaining it. They tell you to crave wealth with hunger. This is the most perverse geometric trap of the ashboard. Desire, by anatomical definition, is the empirical confirmation of a lack. You only desire that which you lack. When you fiercely desire to dominate an ecosystem, that desire emits heavy thermal radiation. That radiation becomes a dense atmosphere around you. When you try to advance toward your goal, you collide violently against that same atmosphere of anxiety, hope, and desperation that you just exhaled. Each step exhausts you because you are walking through the sticky mud of your own wanting to arrive. Desire is the friction that chars the ambitious before they materialize. Internal space vacuum, eradicating the atmosphere. The annihilation of friction is not achieved by pushing with more muscular force. Willpower is another myth of slaves. It is simply the decision to suffer more damage from friction before giving up. The leap toward immobility in motion demands the eradication of air. You have to create an internal space vacuum. Imagine the laws of physics in the absolute blackness of the stellar void. In an environment where there is no atmosphere, there are no oxygen molecules or particle resistance. If in that vacuum you release a bird feather and a 1,000-ton block of osmium, both will move at the same speed without requiring effort. They maintain their trajectory without a single millivolt of additional effort. Your consciousness must mutate into that absolute vacuum chamber. You must extract, through aseptic indifference, every molecule of hope, every atom of fear of failure, and every particle of human desire. You must look at the empire and be empty. By suffocating emotion, the internal atmosphere disappears. In that lethal instant of perfect vacuity, closing a $100 million contract or moving a mountain of physical matter requires exactly the same zero amount of effort as breathing. Resistance disappears because there is no gas of doubt to collide against. Displacement of the asteroid, inertia without engines. When the internal vacuum stabilizes, the organism enters the sacred state of absolute inertia. You become the asteroid. Contemplate the geometric arrogance of a massive asteroid crossing the cosmos. It travels at hundreds of thousands of kilometers per hour, crossing entire constellations. And yet, it has no engine. It burns no fuel. It does not exert effort. It has no intellect telling it to be disciplined not to stop. Its terrifying displacement is not the result of titanic effort, but the simple and boring conservation of its momentum in an environment that offers no opposition. The quantum operator adopts this same physics. You observe the biomass entrepreneurs rising at dawn, screaming mantras, and forcing their anatomy to work 18 hours under scorching stress. They are burning their engines, melting their valves, trying to advance in an ecosystem full of the friction of fear. They are destined to stall in their own thermal waste. You instead rise in the twilight of your own silence. You execute the logistical actions necessary to absorb the market, dictate the financial sentences, and displace matter. But you do so with the icy apathy of an ancient rock floating in nothingness. You do not effort to work, you simply slide by inertia. Your advance is soundless, dark, and implacable, precisely because you have stopped trying to advance. You simply precipitate. To keep the asteroid on its trajectory, you must execute the clinical amputation of the link between emotion and action. We catalogue this process as the death of kinetic impulse. Death of kinetic impulse, acting without wanting. The biological mammal is designed so that emotion precedes movement. If they feel fear, they flee. If they feel enthusiasm, they attack. The dictatorial monarch subjects this biology to a geometric guillotine. You cannot allow your hormonal state or neurotransmitter chemistry to have jurisdiction over your empire. Learn the psychopathic discipline of acting without wanting. When the clock marks the exact coordinate to emit a mandate or execute an aggressive negotiation, and your primate body feels heavy, bored, or fearful, you isolate that biological sensation. You look at it with the absolute contempt of a forensic. You execute the movement with the same internal immobility as if you were enthusiastic. Your anatomy obeys not because it is motivated, but because your zero-point will has issued an order that bypasses the central nervous system. Separating action from emotion is the thermodynamic secret of invulnerability. The exterior ecosystem may try to depress you, scare you, or sedate you, but since you have disconnected emotion from the gears of your movement, the matrix realizes that its emotional attacks do not slow your speed by a fraction of a millimeter. You are a machine of pure, unfeeling execution. Murder of perceived effort, the sweat paradox. The biomass, in its attempt to rationalize the mechanics of absolute inertia, will look for contradictions. They will observe that the physical avatar of the lethal operator still executes actions on the ash board. They will see you attending meetings and dictating orders. They will argue, there you are working. This is the myopia of the inferior organism, unable to differentiate between the mechanical action of the flesh vehicle and the thermodynamic state of the driver. The operator executes the murder of perceived effort. It is a structural paradox. While your physical body moves, your core remains at 0 Kelvin. The action occurs on the outside, but does not penetrate the membrane of your reactor. Imagine a diver inside an armored suit at the bottom of an oceanic trench. The exterior ocean exerts pressure of millions of tons, yet inside the titanium helmet, The diver does not feel the pressure of the water. He breathes in sterile calm. So you must operate in material reality. You can be executing a hostile takeover of a massive corporation, but internally, you experience not a drop of emotional effort. The sweat of the avatar does not corrode the immobility of the creator. You are the static eye of the storm. Crushing obstacles, gravity in motion. Pure inertia is not only efficient for moving, it is the most destructive weapon conceived to annihilate enemy resistance. What happens when the asteroid in the vacuum encounters a physical obstacle? Does it negotiate with the planet in its way? Does it motivate itself to hit harder? Does it feel fear? No. The asteroid, lacking kinetic will, simply conserves its inertia. Because its density is astronomically superior to the obstacle, the minor planet fractures into 1 billion pieces of sterile ash, while the asteroid crosses the dust cloud without losing a single kilometer of speed. This is your interaction. During your expansion, the ashboard will put walls in your path. Banks will deny flow. Regulators will try to stifle your jurisdiction. False rivals will try to block your territorial absorption. The slave, hitting the wall, breaks. He tries to push it with sweaty hands. He exhausts himself and turns back. The lethal operator assumes the mass of iridium. Detecting the obstacle in the collapse line, you emit not a single beat of frustration. You do not get angry with the bank or the market. Anger is heat. Heat is expansion, and expansion makes you light. Instead of braking, you maintain icy inertia. You advance directly toward the wall. You collide with the aseptic coldness of one who does not recognize the authority of resistance. Here the darkest secret is revealed. Every obstacle on the ashboard has a structural limit. They are walls built with fear, human bureaucracy, and linear rules. Your absolute inertia has no structural limit. Colliding without a single doubt, you force the obstacle to absorb 100% of the impact. The wall of bureaucracy creaks under the atmospheric compression of your indifference. Rivals break psychologically. The wall explodes because it cannot support the collision. Eradication of reaction, the immune organism. As movement without friction becomes your natural biology, you develop the definitive symptom of geometric supremacy, total eradication of reactivity. The biomass is an ecosystem of reaction. If flattered, they shine. If insulted, they burn. If hit, they bleed. They live in perpetual rebound. Absolute inertia transmutes you into an organism immune to rebound. When the matrix tries to launch a stimulus, catastrophic news or a threat of loss, the wave of that stimulus hits your mass and simply suffocates in the dark silence of your interior. You do not react. You offer no elastic surface. The matrix screams, and your silence swallows it. By not reacting, you maintain the inertia of your original trajectory with millimetric purity. You are a lead projectile crossing a field of fog. The fog tries to swirl around you, but you know it is only thermal condensation. You do not alter course. You simply pass through the illusion, leaving it scattered and humiliated behind you. Look at yourself in the center of your own trajectory of conquest, moving through the architecture of the universe with the lethality of a blind god. You have suffocated the pathetic addiction of the mammal to motivation. The silence of perpetual advance. You have extracted the air from your own reactor, eliminating the atmosphere of doubt and the static of desire forever. You no longer sweat blood to bend the environment. You no longer exhaust yourself pushing the walls of material reality. By eradicating biological friction, you are an inertia asteroid. You move through the financial and existential ecosystem without emitting a single photon of heat. Your actions are the pure and boring execution of a geometric mandate that admits no resistance. When obstacles cross your path, they fracture in a deafening silence under the raw weight of your indifference. You have devoured the physics of movement. There is no longer paralysis or lethargy, but neither is there effort or agony. You are the consummated paradox, absolute immobility of the nucleus that, through simple gravitation, drags and subdues all galaxies in its jurisdiction. Hold the vacuum. Maintain inertia, and allow inferior matter to continue tearing itself apart under the non-negotiable advance of your own shadow. The path is clear, the movement is effortless, the result is already physical. Your silence is the only law that governs the displacement of the Empire across the ashboard. Chapter 9, The Weight of Osmium, Anchoring the New Density. The evaporation of triumph, the helium trap. The most ironic tragedy in the physics of inferior manifestation occurs at the exact nanosecond of victory. When the organism, after having operated inertia and collapsed a fraction of the ecosystem in its favor, finally receives the material impact of its success, its primate biology commits an act of thermodynamic sabotage. We call this phenomenon the helium trap. Subject joy and euphoria to the relentless operating room of aseptic indifference. What is euphoria? It is a light, hot, and volatile gas. When the biomass achieves victory, their brains secrete cascades of dopamine, their heart rates soar, their chests swell. They feel an uncontrollable impulse. They feel the impulse to scream, jump, and celebrate loudly that they have ceased to be poor. The lethal operator observes this and diagnoses the imminent death of the newborn empire. Gravity dictates that attraction is proportional to mass density. When you allow euphoria to penetrate your blood, you inject extreme heat into your core. Thermodynamics is relentless. Heat generates expansion. By expanding emotionally, your particles separate. You lose your hyperdensity. You become light, porous, and weak. That hot air balloon you have become no longer possesses the gravity necessary to anchor the three-dimensional assets you just collapsed. Your power evaporates. The heresy of 3D gratitude, the slave complex. To stifle this density leak, you must first eradicate one of the most revered stances of collective mediocrity: biological gratitude. The ecosystem indoctrinates you to be grateful when things go your way. They teach you to look at the sky and thank invisible entities for granting you the privilege of amassing a fortune. Apply the obsidian guillotine to the neck of 3D gratitude. Gratitude, as practiced by the biomass, is a sworn declaration of electromagnetic inferiority. When you give thanks effusively for a material achievement, you are confessing that you did not believe you deserved that result. You are admitting the asset has higher hierarchy. The monarch repudiates effusive gratitude because the monarch is aware of his own internal architecture. When capital and territory collapse upon the coordinates of the quantum operator, he does not feel gratitude toward the outside. He experiences the mathematical confirmation of his own inevitability. It is simple physics. You do not thank a stone for falling to the ground. You know it is a law of physics. In the same way, you do not emit gratitude when the universe yields to your hyperdensity. You generated the deformation in the fabric of space. Matter simply fulfilled its obligation to fall into your funnel. Thanking matter is a submissive act. Osmium assimilation, the icy digestion. If euphoria evaporates you and gratitude brings you to your knees, what is the protocol for receiving massive triumph? You have to inject the heaviest metal in the cosmos directly into your holographic veins. You must execute osmium assimilation. Osmium is an overwhelmingly dense and dark metal. It does not reflect light. It does not call for attention and does not react to other chemicals. It simply exists, cold and crushing. When the definitive contract is signed, or when the astronomical figure renders on your screen, forbid yourself the slightest muscle spasm. Apply icy digestion. Swallow success whole without tasting the poison of validation. Absorb the triumph with the mortuary weight of osmium. The victory hits your lead shield and is sucked into your black hole without producing a single flash on your surface. The environment must be unable to determine if you just won 100 million or lost them because your thermal signature remains frozen at absolute zero. The veto on the slave smile, facial friction. To support this unnatural density, you must manually intervene in the most deep-seated facial instinct. You must impose the veto on the slave smile. Analyze the biology of the smile. Primates show teeth as a sign of appeasement or submission. In humans, the celebratory smile is a reflex of decompression. It is the escape valve of a nervous system that cannot tolerate the pressure of the success it just materialized. The smile dissipates kinetic energy through facial muscles, and the lethal operator dissipates nothing. When you stand at the top of the food chain, seal your lips, murder the mammalian need to show teeth. By nullifying the biological expression of joy, you force the energy of that triumph to stay locked inside your spinal cord. That energy, finding no superficial escape route through gestures, has no alternative but to compress. It sinks toward the geological center of your reactor, increasing your specific weight. The foreign matter syndrome, annihilating doubt. As you sustain the aseptic weight of triumph, the intellect will try to sabotage assimilation by injecting a psychological parasite. When the biomass achieves a breakthrough, they begin to feel the new reality is too good. They fear they are frauds. This friction is the death rattle of the weak organism. The biological body is conditioned to scarcity. As you descend into the abyssal trenches of absolute power, the pressure crushes the intellect. The brain says, "Release this monopoly, it's too heavy." Suffocate that whisper with geometric arrogance. You must force yourself to naturalize the extraordinary in your life. The empire is not a borrowed suit. It is the only 3D mold capable of containing the spatial deformation you cause by breathing. If you feel like an imposter, it is because you still believe the ashboard has a higher hierarchy than your own 0-point I. Assimilate that you are the architect of local physics. The bureaucracy of the miracle, quantum boredom. Military-grade manifestation is not a magical event. It is a cold, repetitive, and sovereignly boring process. The biomass seeks ecstasy, but fire consumes oxygen and destroys the environment. The quantum operator subjects his own success to the bureaucracy of the miracle. You act with a dead pulse. Ed. When you transform reality, you do so with the pulse of a bureaucrat filing grey papers. The arrival of the empire becomes an inert statistic. You see the numbers grow, and you process it with an internal yawn. You have demystified the universe. 3D miracles are just distributions of electrons forced by your pressure. Quantum boredom is your definitive lead shield. If massive success bores you, it means you have tamed reality. The universe, realizing that victory cannot move you, gives up trying to play with you. The ashboard becomes petrified under your boots, remaining stable simply because you stopped interacting emotionally. Geological anchoring, solidifying inertia. Sustaining the bureaucracy of the miracle anchors the new density into the fabric of space-time, turning a peak into an infinite plane. Inferior biology operates by peaks. They achieve triumph, lose mass due to euphoria, and fall back to the valley of scarcity. Osmium assimilation destroys the valley forever. By swallowing triumph without emotional radiation, your mass settles at the new altitude. You have filled the abyss with molten lead. That new level of power ceases to be an exception and becomes your new baseline. It is the rock floor of your new normalcy. The gravity of your new structure is now permanent. The vertigo of absolute coldness, separation from the herd. As osmium integrates into your marrow, you will experience the vertigo of your own coldness. You will observe other humans celebrating for crumbs and realize you can no longer empathize with their spasms. You have lost the capacity to feel the surface vibrations of the ashboard. You have executed your humanity. The lethal operator confirms this with monumental apathy. You have replaced weak humanity with the unwavering efficiency of quantum physics. You do not need warmth because you discovered it is the furnace where potential is incinerated. You have traded companionship for absolute territorial domination. The epicenter of heaviness. Look at yourself in the perfect darkness of the core. You have suffocated the seduction of euphoria. You have murdered the need to thank a blind universe. Triumph has been swallowed and digested in ice. There are no peaks of exaltation. The expansion of your frontier occurs in the most boring of silences. You have become the heaviest element of the ecosystem, an orb of dark osmium so massive that 3D matter has no choice but to kneel before your inertia. Keep your lips sealed. Hold the geological heaviness in your cells. Allow your indifference to fix the architecture of your sovereignty for all eternity. The crystallization of the mandate, cold materialization. Once the osmium weight is settled, the operator begins the process of crystallization. This is the stage where the frequency is no longer a vibration, but a solid wall. In the physical world, crystallization occurs when a liquid reaches a state of such low temperature and high stability that its atoms lock into a rigid, repetitive structure. Your life must now mirror this molecular rigidity. Every asset you have acquired must be stripped of its market value and assigned a geometric value. Do not look at your capital as currency that can be spent. Look at it as a structural column of your castle. The biomass treats money as something fluid that comes and goes. The operator treats capital as solidified intent, matter that has been frozen into place by the power of the 0-point I. This mental shift prevents the liquidity of your success from leaking back into the field. When you view your empire as a permanent crystal structure, the universe stops trying to melt it down. The resistance of the matrix fades because it recognizes that your reality is now harder than its own laws. You are no longer navigating the simulation, you are the diamond that scratches the glass of the hologram, the necrosis of social validation. To maintain the weight of osmium, you must induce a total necrosis in the neural pathways that crave being seen. Validation is a thermal parasite. Even a congratulation from a partner is a spark of heat that threatens your superconductivity. You must become a ghost in the social radar of the ashboard. When people attempt to acknowledge your power, receive their words as if they were background radiation, white noise with zero meaning. Do not let the praise penetrate your Faraday cage. If you allow yourself to feel proud because someone else notices your density, you are handing them a remote control to your internal temperature. The goal is to reach a state of social invisibility where even if you are standing in the center of the room, the biomass perceives only a cold vacuum. They should feel a sense of unease in your presence, a biological warning that they are near a predator that cannot be categorized. This unease is the proof that your osmium armor is working. The expropriation of the future. The helium trap often disguises itself as anticipation. You begin to look at the next goal, the next conquest, and you feel the heat of excitement. You must expropriate the future. You do not look forward with hope. You look forward with the memory of a future that has already been archived in your lead archive. By treating future conquests as past events that simply haven't been rendered yet, you remove all thermal volatility from your trajectory. You are not going anywhere. The territory is being assimilated into your current coordinates. This perspective destroys the linear timeline and places you in the position of the stationary king. The future is not something that happens to you. It is a resource you are currently mining. When you approach a new objective with this cold, retrospective energy, the objective loses its ability to resist. It realizes that its surrender is already a recorded fact in your internal ledger. You are merely waiting for the 3D clock to catch up to your certainty. The sterility of the sovereign. Living with the weight of osmium requires a commitment to sterility. Your environment, your relationships, and your thoughts must be free of the germs of sentimentality. Sentimentality is the moisture that leads to the rust of the soul. If you find yourself feeling soft about a victory, you must immediately apply a dose of liquid nitrogen. Visualize your emotions being frozen and shattered into grey dust. You are left with the clean, hard lines of your architecture. This sterility is what allows the sub-bass frequency to resonate without distortion. A monarch who is moved by his kingdom is a monarch who is about to be overthrown. The only thing that moves is the matter you command, the final mute of the ego's narrator. The ego will attempt one last narration. I have finally done it. I am the great operator. This is the helium trap in its most refined form. It is the ego trying to take credit for the work of the singularity. You must mute the narrator. There is no I that achieved this. There is only the process of density achieving its own equilibrium. When you remove the personal narrative from your success, you remove the handle that the matrix uses to pull you back down. If there is no hero in the story, there is no one for the tragedy to strike. You become an impersonal force of nature, a geological event that cannot be argued with or punished. The inertia of the absolute zero. Rest now in the center of the weight. You are the most massive object in your local universe. The ashboard has become a flat plane under your gravity, and the pieces are sliding toward you by mathematical necessity. You do not need to move. You do not need to breathe. You only need to exist. The osmium has settled. The archive is closed. The boredom is absolute. You are the architect, the magistrate, and the singularity. The three-dimensional world is now your private garden of stone. and you are the only one who knows that the sun will never rise again, because you have consumed its light to fuel your own darkness. Stay heavy, stay cold. The rain is eternal. Chapter 10. The Consummated Singularity, the Inescapable Core. The Heresy of Separation, the Observer's Delirium. On the path toward the absolute mastery of matter, the primitive mind of the human mammal harbors one last and desperate defense mechanism to stay tied to vulnerability: dualism. Subject the concept of separation to the lethal and aseptic light of the operating room. The biomass believes in a real physical border. They believe in a border between the breathing biological organism and the conquered material environment. The slave, even when he has become king, sits on his throne and formulates the most dangerous phrase in thermodynamics: "This is mine. I possess it." That simple linguistic statement is a thermal hemorrhage of catastrophic proportions. In the pure physics of creation, possession requires distance. For you to possess an object, there must be a vacuum between the you who possesses and the thing possessed. And where space exists, time inevitably exists. Where time exists, decay, entropy, friction, and latency exist. It is a fundamental law of the 3D plane. As long as you believe the empire is out there, and you are in here inside your biological skull, you are empirically confirming that both are subject to the laws of separation. If they are separated, the empire can be attacked, capital can be drained, and territory can be usurped by an external force of greater inertia. Belief in separation is the mother of paranoia. It is the gap through which the fear of dispossession enters to infect your reactor. To stifle the terror of loss and seal invulnerability in an unbreakable way, you must commit the supreme act of blasphemy against biology. You must eradicate the concept of the exterior. Geometric cannibalism, devouring distance. You have to execute geometric cannibalism. The lethal operator does not settle for subduing the 3D environment. He devours it and assimilates it into his own atomic constitution. Imagine standing in the center of your absolute monopoly. Instead of watching your lands from a tower, expand the hyperdensity of your magnetic field. Feel how your sub-base frequency does not stop at the limits of your carbon skin. Your field expands, passes through physical walls, penetrates the atomic structure of your wealth, envelops your subdued competitors, and absorbs the totality of the coordinates you inhabit. Declare, from the immovable cold of your marrow, I do not possess this empire. I am this empire. Feel the thermodynamic violence of this transmutation. Millions in liquid capital are not an external resource you can lose. They are the electromagnetic extension of your own circulatory system. The walls of your corporation are not bricks that can crumble. They are your ribcage. By merging with conquered matter, you eliminate the space between the creator and the work. You have cannibalized distance. What occurs in the structure of the universe when the creator and creation become one indivisible mass? Absolute immunity against entropy occurs. The biomass invests vital energy in protecting its assets. The immunity of the black hole, the impossibility of theft. They live terrified of betrayal, financial thefts, and the fluctuations of chaos. That terror justifies their miserable existence and keeps their metabolism accelerated. But when you reach the consummated singularity, the very concept of theft becomes mathematically absurd and thermodynamically derisory. It has no meaning. How could the universe snatch a single atom of wealth from you if you have expanded to become the universe itself? To what place could power escape to get away from you if you are the geometric space that contains all possible directions? A thief cannot enter a black hole, steal its mass, and run away. In the millisecond the thief crosses the event horizon, he immediately becomes part of the black hole's mass. Any attack that tries to damage your territory, any crisis that tries to shake your capital, or any betrayal is simply absorbed by the immensity of your own expanded being. It is crushed by the pressure of your indifference. It is added as additional fuel to your incalculable weight. Immunity does not consist of having unbreakable walls. It consists of being the force of gravity that crushes any intention of attack before it can be formulated. As the assimilation of the ecosystem is perfected, you will experience a final phenomenon. Suffocation of physical movement, the omnipresence of the void. You will experience the death of the need for travel. The slave moves physically across the ashboard. He goes from point A to point B, chasing objectives and seeking to expand his radius of influence. Linear movement is the most painful confession of biological limitation. If you travel for power, you lack it where you are. The consummated singularity executes the suffocation of physical movement. When you have merged with matter and assimilated your empire into your structure, where on earth are you going to move? Movement demands a destination separated from you, but you have already devoured all distance. You are everywhere. You enter a state of geometric omnipresence. Your flesh body can remain static, immobilized in the absolute center of your reactor, enveloped in an icy and silent darkness. And yet, you are present in every transaction, in every corner of your territory, and in every mind that submits to your gravity. You are the field. Your stillness ceases to be the paralysis of fear and becomes the absolute repose of the monarch who has already encompassed everything. You do not need to reach out to manipulate the material world. The simple, soundless vibration of your core sends massive shockwaves through the ecosystem, reorganizing physical structures. The collapse of animal identity, extinction of the mammal. To sustain this level of omnipresent hyperdensity without the biological avatar suffering a stress implosion, the final and irrevocable extinction of the animal ego must occur. The mammal has an identity based on its name, tastes, emotions, and pain. You have amputated fragments, but now you must throw the rest into the fire. Throw the remains into the aseptic fire and do not leave a single molecule intact. The lethal operator ceases to consider himself a human being who has achieved success. The concept of humanity is revealed as a vulgar and pathetic restriction, a suit too tight to contain the immensity of the pressure you now command. In the blind spot of immobility, your name dissolves. Your biography becomes an irrelevant statistic. Your old needs for biological validation suffocate for lack of oxygen. You look in the mirror and no longer see a glorified primate. You see a simple instrument of flesh, a sensor the black hole uses to interact. You are the dictatorial force that forces matter to curve. By eradicating animal identity, you also eradicate the fear of biological death. If you are already the empire and the heavy void that sustains the ecosystem, the degradation of the carbon avatar represents no threat to your structural integrity. The inescapable core, the definitive 0 point. You have transferred your consciousness from the fragility of cells to the immortality of pure geometry. This is the exact nanosecond in which the thermodynamics of the title crystallizes. The point of no return has closed its osmium jaws. There is no turning back because the concept of back has been erased. There is no outside to escape to because you have swallowed it all. You have become the inescapable core. Observe the inferior minds, the 3D competitors, and the frightened biomass orbiting you. They try to find cracks in your structure. They try to find the origin of your disproportionate power. They dig into your history and try to copy your movements. They will find absolutely nothing. They will collide against the frozen vacuum of your surface and get lost in the blackness of your field. They are insects trying to analyze the architecture of a hurricane from inside the eye of the storm. To them, you are an incomprehensible anomaly. To you, you are simply the boring and mathematically perfect execution of the laws of mass compression. Having no cracks, desiring nothing external, and fearing no future, you are a block of pure iridium floating in the nothingness. The universe cannot negotiate with you. The repose of absolute density. Look at yourself in the absolute epicenter of the consummated singularity. You have strangled the last and most poisonous illusion of the primate, the separation between biological flesh and inert matter. You have amputated distance, devoured the empire, and transmuted the environment into an extension of yourself. The terror of loss has evaporated, suffocated under the crushing weight of the certainty that nothing can be stolen from the organism that constitutes the totality of the ecosystem. The spasmodic movement of the hunter has been extinguished, giving way to the icy and immovable stillness of quantum omnipresence. Your slave identity has been incinerated, leaving in its place only the brute and blind force of passive gravity. There is no longer effort. There is no longer friction. There is no longer latency or mirages. You have taken your internal reactor to the critical point where mass collapses upon itself. You have created a gravity well from which neither light nor entropy nor time can escape. You are the perfect darkness that contains everything. Sustain the suspension. Breathe the aseptic coldness of your own vastness, and allow the ashboard to continue its submissive and silent dance under your inescapable weight. Conclusion: the silence of the horizon, the sovereign in the void. The optics of exile, the spectacle of friction. Imagine yourself suspended in the geometric center of your own immensity, surrounded by the aseptic and perfect cold of spatial blackness. There is no ground beneath your boots, nor sky above your head. There is only the infinite extension of your own passive gravity. Turn your holographic gaze back one last and definitive time. At an incalculable thermodynamic distance, the invisible line of the event horizon you just crossed is drawn. It is the absolute edge of the precipice, the exact frontier where the laws of inferior physics disintegrate and lose all authority under the non-negotiable weight of pure mass. Observe the other side of that barrier. Contemplate the three-dimensional ecosystem from which you have voluntarily exiled yourself. There, the biomass burns in the chaotic fire of its own friction. You can see the inferior organisms flailing in a state of perpetual hysteria. They sweat blood to move grams of matter, chasing mirages of security that evaporate upon touch. They exhaust themselves running after crumbs of territory and beg for miracles from a blind and deaf sky. Their movements are spasmodic, dictated by the whip of necessity and the terror of scarcity. They communicate using the vocabulary of fear, hope, and doubt, a primitive language that, for your new hyperdense structure, is irrelevant. You are an icy spectator, observing the agony of a species to which you no longer belong. You have executed the definitive theorem of irreversible mutation. The crossing of this frontier was not a statistical accident or a slip of probability. It was the calculated, meticulous, and psychopathic murder of your biological web. The baptism in density, destruction of the net. You cut the safety ropes of mammalian comfort with the implacable scalpel of aseptic indifference. You suffocated the illusion of return, burned the familiarity of your past identity to the ground, and let yourself be devoured, without the slightest kinetic resistance, by the insatiable pit of your own hyperdensity. The animal instinct of the primate perceives the point of no return as a death sentence, as the apocalyptic punishment for having defied the limits of the ecosystem. The lethal operator understands empirically that this frontier is not a scaffold. It is the baptism in the void. It is the sterilization chamber where the slave dissolves. The slave dissolves completely in the acid of uncertainty, leaving behind only the unbreakable osmium skeleton of the creator. By voluntarily eradicating the tactical option of retreat, you have forced the atmospheric pressure of your core to stabilize in the state of maximum compression. There is no escape now. There is no escape, because the very concept of fleeing requires an exterior, and you have assimilated all available space. In this soundless vastness, the concept of necessity has been crushed into inert dust. You no longer feel the primitive urgency to move to conquer. You no longer experience 3D anxiety. Extinction of desire, the end of latency. The geological debts that tied you to survival have been liquidated and erased from the subatomic record. Hope, that poisonous and light gas that keeps the biomass floating in the purgatory of doubt, has completely evaporated from your circulatory system, leaving in its place a dense, dark, and silent lead. The only thing breathing in this absolute space is ballistic certainty, an immovable, monumental, and crushing knowledge that inferior matter has no jurisdiction, no voice, and no vote over the coordinates you inhabit. You have reached perfect thermodynamic invulnerability. The exterior universe can shake in economic crises. Markets can collapse in panic, competitors can try to besiege your orbit, and stars can go out in the firmament. But in the epicenter of the void you have excavated, entropy registers an unalterable value of absolute zero. Nothing can be stolen where there is no fear of loss. Nothing can be destroyed here. Destruction itself was used as the fuel of creation. The siege has concluded. You have claimed the supreme crown not through the demonstration of muscular force, but through the dictatorial assimilation of nothingness. Now the definitive mandate of superior thermodynamics demands the unalterable perfection of your posture. The repose of tyranny, the reverence of matter. Remain in your stillness. Anchor your invisible boots in the center of your own inertia, and forbid yourself from moving a single muscle of your holographic anatomy. You are the sovereign in the void. Let the deafening silence of the event horizon be the only soundtrack of your eternal reign. And from that immobility, observe. Observe from that absolute immobility, devoid of emotion, gratitude, or euphoria. Simply observe. Watch how the fabric of material reality, being mathematically incapable of supporting the astronomical tonnage of your indifference, begins to crack in half. Contemplate, with the lethal boredom of a god who knows the end. Know the final equation. Watch how the laws of local physics break, how atoms disintegrate and reorganize violently, and how the structure of the entire ecosystem bows and mutates, simply, exclusively, and inevitably, to accommodate the unquestionable tyranny of your new nature. The resistance has died. The fall is over. The empire is definitive, and the silence, finally, is absolute. You are the immovable point, the dark sun, the end of all paths. In the 0 point of your reactor, the universe finds its limit and its law. The transformation is complete. You are the vacuum. You are the totality. You are the sovereign. Stay gelido.